You're on.
Oh, sorry. I know that I believe that Xavier wanted to speak.
I'm here, everyone. I have to jump on at town hall with Chancellor Banks in just a moment with CEC4. I wanted to say thank you, everyone, for being here for the update. I will be listening in simultaneously while attending that town hall. And I wanted to introduce Jason Villanueva. He is also our treasurer of Community Board 11. He has served previously as the Statement of District Needs and Budget Committee as their chair. And after we lost our previous chair to this committee, Elsie Encarnacion, and subsequently Andrew Padilla, I've asked him to take on the role. He has a wealth of knowledge, and I look forward to seeing him succeed in this new role. And I thank everyone for being in the space. And I'm going to pass the baton to you, Jason. Have a great meeting. I'll be listening in. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Xavier. Very much appreciated. Look forward to serving everyone on the committee. Those that you don't know me, I promise you we'll definitely get into that. So I do want to call the meeting into order. So that way we could progress forward and be on time. We do have a packed agenda. I want to welcome everyone to the May 11th, 2022 meeting of CB11's Land Use, Landmarks, and Planning Committee. My name is Jason Villanueva, and I am the chair of the committee. This meeting is called to order at 6:33 p.m. Tonight, we are joined by the district manager, Angel Muscane, the staff liaison to our committee. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members, if you have any questions about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. If you click the participants icon, the participants panel should appear and you should find the raise hand function there. If you still are having technical difficulty, you may click the chat icon and relay your difficulty to the staff. Members should not engage in a back and forth discussion. The chair will recognize the next person to speak. I do ask those of you that do have some to stay. We try to stay short within the 2-minute playing field. And then obviously, if you have more to express, I do request you submit it to us in writing. With writing, this comes the next fun part, right? The chat function. It should not be used for CB11 business or questions about the agenda topics. It's very difficult to manage the meeting, chat, stay on agenda, right? While we're virtual. So I do, request some understanding with such regards, right? So all such remarks should be made on record by raising your hand through Zoom. Moving along. The chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you're having or to state in writing information like an email address that was already stated out loud on the record during the meeting. When a member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you can speak. Please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. Members of the public, if you have any questions or comments about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand through Zoom and wait to be recognized. I promise you, no voice will be left unheard. We will now take attendance by roll call. Board members, you can unmute yourselves and answer present when your name is called. CB11 staff will call out the names and announce whether a quorum is present, which we pretty much already did. So I will now turn it over to Mr. Muscane.
All right. Jessica Elliott.
Present.
James Horton. Beverly Pabon.
Present.
Robert Perez.
Present.
Vinny Torres. Jason Villanueva.
Sorry, Vinny Torres, present.
Okay.
Present.
And Candy Vivas Vasquez. You have quorum.
Thank you, Angel. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and was posted online. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Committee members, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Going once, going twice. Seeing no objections, we will adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting. So now we'll go on to the meeting minutes. The minutes from our last the minutes.
I'm sorry, Jason. We don't have minutes for last month. You can skip this part.
Not a problem. Sweet. we will fix that moving forward, I promise. Any announcements? Okay, then we should be to move on to the agenda.
I just wanted to alert everyone that the next scheduled meeting for this committee will be on June 8th at 6:30.
Thank you, OHU. Anyone else? Any informational updates? Neighborhood updates? All right. I got an update. Moving forward, we got to turn our cameras on. Teasing. Thank you, everyone. No, seriously, really appreciate everyone's attendance being here today. It's very interesting and a packed agenda. And we're going to go through it. I think at this stage, I'll turn it over to Angel so we can introduce some of the people in the agenda that was given out.
Sure. So we have 2 project updates, projects that were reviewed by the board back in 2017 in the olden times. So the first project is an update on the planned 126th Street Harlem African Burial Ground mixed-use development. We'll be hearing from representatives from EDC and other project partners. Second, we'll be hearing an update on the planned Educational Construction Fund project at the School for Cooperative Education, Co-op Tech, on 96th Street. We'll be hearing from Jennifer Maldonado from ECF. And then lastly, the committee will be having a discussion on the 421A property tax exemption that is due to expire next month. So with that, we hand it over to Fernando and the other reps that will be speaking on behalf of the burial ground project.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me? Perfect. I'm looking for there I am. Oh, I don't know why I look so red. Okay, my lighting. I promise I'm not a Martian. Well, thank you all for having us. Angel, quick question. Well, first, let me introduce myself. My name is Fernando Ortiz, Assistant Vice President at the EDC for Government and Community Relations, overseeing the Bronx and Upper Manhattan portfolio. Quick question, should I share my screen or do you have the presentation?
You can share. I just took mine down. Yep.
Perfect. Let me share my screen. Do you all see blank?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a great presentation for now.
I promise I have more than that. Let me see what the issue is. Let me reload this. Perfect. Are you all able to see my screen now?
Perfect.
Perfect. Perfect. So I first wanted to, again, just reintroduce myself. And, you know, I'm accompanied today by some of my colleagues here at EDC, as well as by the Harlem African Burial Ground Task Force. So I'll let them introduce themselves. I see some of them on the call. Reverend Patricia, if you want to introduce yourself.
Is she on mute? Reverend, you're on mute.
Oh,
There you
okay.
go. Yes.
There you go.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm the Reverend Dr. Patricia Singletary, and the pastor of the Elmendorf Reformed Church. And also my doctoral dissertation discovered Harlem's African burial ground and this task force.
Thank you so much, Reverend. And Melissa, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Melissa Marriverito, former council member and speaker, and it was during my term that we finalized and voted on this land use matter. Great to see you all, and thank you for having us tonight.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I don't know if Sharon is on the call. No worries. Well, thank you all for joining us on this or having us on this afternoon. We're here to just give a brief update and project summary of what we're calling the 126th Street Harlem African Burial Ground Memorial and Mixed Use Project. We're here to just give a brief update and project summary. So let me just move this so I can see the screen. Perfect. So on the left, you will see a map. The area indicated in red is the site of the future 126th Street redevelopment project. And the area in yellow is the historical burial ground boundary. So the project is located on 2660 2nd Avenue. It is a full city-owned, a full block city-owned site that is occupied by a decommissioned MTA bus depot, formerly called the 126th Street MTA bus depot. And a portion of the site is the historical Harlem African Burial Ground. So as you'll see on the image on the right, the historical burial ground is, sitting beneath the decommissioned bus depot. So just a little bit of the history of the burial site. It dates back to Harlem's earliest days. If you look at the image on the right, which the burial ground is shaded in yellow, it was on the waterfront at the time. And, since then, the city, during its development has landfilled a lot of, not just Manhattan, a lot of New York, of the Bronx and Brooklyn's edges. And so during that time, the edge of this part of Harlem was landfilled. So that's why it's no longer on the water's edge. But in 1660, the new Harlem is chartered by the Dutch settlers on indigenous land. In the mid 1660s, the Low Dutch Reformed Church, the predecessor to today's Elmendorf Reformed Church, is founded with 2 cemeteries, one of them being for European descent and one being for both freed and enslaved people of African descent. In 1869, prompted by the northward expansion and the development of the city, the church leaders began transferring the human remains of the white Europeans to new plots. Those buried in the Harlem African Burial Ground, however, unfortunately, are left behind and the cemetery is displaced as the hills are leveled and parts of the Harlem River shoreline are filled in with landfill during the northward expansion. A little bit more on the history. So in 1885 through 1917, the site was used as a beer garden and casino. In 1917 and to about 1918, it was also the home of the barracks for the 15th New York National Guard Infantry Regiment, an all-Black unit. In 1918 through 1945, it was William Randolph Hearst's Cosmopolitan Productions, which was a movie studio. And then from 1945 to 1962, it was the Third Avenue Railway Company trolley barn with its current depot built in 1947. So the depot that is there currently decommissioned was built around 1947. And in 1962 to the present, the MTA occupied the space as a bus depot, which was active until about 2015. And again, here in the image, you'll see the bus depot shaded in red with the Harlem African Burial Ground in yellow. And you'll see it's literally right beneath the bus depot. And you'll see the shaded lines show what was the historical or natural water's edge. And you'll see that shaded area is area that has been landfilled and which is now, part of the FDR and the Harlem River Drive. So the project background itself, in the early 2000s, intensive documenting study for the Willis Avenue Bridge Restoration Project uncovers evidence that there was potential evidence for the Harlem African Burial Ground at the site. In 2009, the Harlem African Burial Ground Task Force, co-chaired by Melissa Mark Riverdito, who is here on the call with us today, but at the time was the former council member for District 8, and Reverend Dr. Patricia A. Singletary, who is the pastor of Elmendorf Reformed Church, who passed Elmendorf Reformed Church, to reiterate, is the child of the former church that was on the site. They found this Harlem African Burial Ground Task Force to advocate for a memorial on this site. In 2011, Community Board 11 designates the Harlem African Burial Ground as the organization to represent the interests of the Harlem African Burial Ground. And in 2015, the MTA decommissions the bus depot and vacates the site. From 2015 to 2016, this is where EDC kind of is asked to lead the redevelopment project with phase 1B, in which an archaeological investigation uncovered more than 140 disarticulated human bones or bone fragments on the site, and which also found that there is evidence that there is much more still there, which is an important anecdote, which I will reference later. And in 2017, CB11, the Manhattan Borough President, City Planning Commission, and the City Council approved land use actions to facilitate this project. So it went through a ULURP. So the vision for this project was memorialized in 2017 through a points of agreement letter. And these kind of project goals are to, one, establish an outdoor memorial and cultural center to honor and commemorate the Harlem African Burial Ground's history and those who are buried there, as well as to develop a mix of uses, including mixed income affordable housing and job creating commercial uses, enhance the streetscape and pedestrian connections to the surrounding neighborhood, and advance a financially feasible project that can support the cost of constructing and operating the memorial and cultural center. The program estimates about anywhere between 524 to 655,000 square foot of housing, which will be about 80% affordable, about 315,000 square footage for commercial and retail space, about 18,000 square footage for an outdoor memorial, about 15,000 square footage for a cultural center, and about 15,000 square footage for a community facility. So you can see here in the project vision, it really is intended to be a mixed use site with the memorial and cultural center at the heart of this redevelopment. It is a massive, site and block, and we think that the main attraction and it should be properly honored as the Harlem African Burial Ground with development around it. So more recent work in 2019, EDC in partnership with the Harlem African Ground Task Force and with the Department of with DCLA partnered on a exhibition that was housed at La Marqueta. And this image here on the right shows a panel that happened during that exhibition. In 2019 to 2020 to 2021, EDC released an RFEI for the operator of the Outdoor Memorial and Cultural Center at the end of the fall of 2019. However, it was canceled in 2021. And in 2001, EDC executes an MOU with MTA to transfer control of the site to the city. So two kind of quick points that I want to make here is, one, you'll see that the RFEI was canceled in 2021. Part of this cancellation was, as you'll see, the RFEI was released in fall of 2019, which, as we all know, February 2021, the world took a big spin. And so COVID had a lot to do to, the reasons as to why the RFEI was canceled. But the other part of it is also that, at the time, cultural organizations in New York through 2020, 2021 were suffering. And so we also recognize that before anything can actually happen on the site, there still needs a lot of work needs to happen. And so we didn't think that it was the best decision to select a cultural operator for the site, till further along. So we are hoping to release that RFEI more in the future. And I'll get a little bit into that in a bit. And the second point is that, as you'll see, in 2021, EDC negotiated with MTA to transfer control of the site. And so at the end of this year, MTA will officially transfer that control to EDC. So MTA will, by the end of this year, no longer have control of the site, which is an important milestone in the project. So all that being said, looking ahead, the next step for the project consists of important pre-development work that will further uncover the important history of the Harlem African Burial Ground and prepare the site for the future memorial, cultural center, and mixed-use development. And this includes phase 2 of the archaeological evaluation of the site in partnership with the Harlem African Burial Ground Task Force, which will consist of determining the complete distribution of the human skeletal remains across the site and recovery, protection and storage of any existing human remains that could be disturbed by future development, It also includes demolition of the decommissioned bus depot. And during all of this outreach and education for the Harlem community and beyond about the Harlem African Burial Ground and this important archaeological work. So here on the right, you'll see images of when phase 1B of the archaeological investigation was occurring, in which, as I mentioned, there was many human remains were found, many parts of human remains were found. And so, and we know for a fact that there's more there. So the next, the next phase is really important, which is, to continue that archaeological evaluation and excavation on the site. Now that the site will officially be transferred to the city and no longer under MTA jurisdiction. And then, once that work is completed, the demolition of the bus depot itself. So, and then at that point, once the archaeological investigation and the demolition have occurred, is more closer to a time in which another RFEI will be released, but more to come on that. So I want to just open it up to questions. And as I mentioned, I'm joined here by the Harlem African Burial Ground Task Force leaders, really two women who have been extremely, extremely important in getting this project off the ground and involved. And, just this project would not be able or existing without the both of them. So we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
And I just want to add, Fernando, and thank you so much for that to the group here, to the committee. The idea and the vision has always been having the cultural operator first and identified first prior to the other housing and developer being identified, right? Because we really want to emphasize the importance of memorializing the burial ground, of having a cultural operator there that can also help inform the project as it continues to move forward. So that commitment still lies there. And right, Fernando, that's the way we'll proceed. Just wanted to clarify that part too.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you, Melissa, for bringing that point up. It is important for us, EDC, and for the task force that the cultural operator is selected before any developer and anything of any other components of the mixed use development occurs, because, as I said, this is really the heart of the project is the memorial center and the memorial site and the cultural center. So we want to ensure that that is prioritized and that any, future development that happens on the site happens in partnership and in conjunction with these operators. So it is important that that happens before anything else. And we are committed to doing that.
Thank you, Fernando. Really, really great presentation. That being said, anybody have any questions?
Beverly Pabon has her hand up from the committee.
Okay. Yes, Beverly.
Thank you for recognition, Chair. Fernando, very great presentation, a lot of information that I wasn't aware of, very educational. So thank you so very much. And I'm glad that this project is moving forward. It's a very big, important historical and educational tidbit for Harlem in general. My questions is two-part. I know that you're not going to be working right now regarding the housing part, but you did mention that it's going to be 80% affordable. Can you be a little bit more specific to that? Because most of the time when we hear affordability, it's usually out of the range of the communities, communities AMI as it is now. So I would like to hear a little bit more if it's anything already in the works on how affordable this would be for this community. My other two questions had to do with the outreach and the education. Can you give me a little bit more information on how y'all would incorporate that to the community and the schools that's in the community about this project? And if there will be any apprenticeship programs to do the phase 2 of the archaeology part of that. I think that would be something that would benefit the the community schools or teens or something like that to be a part of finding out the history of their people in this community. I'll wait for your answer and thank you again.
Thank you, Beverly. I'll answer the second part of the second question first. In terms of outreach and education, I think when I say we, EDC and the Harlem African Burial Ground Task Force are, we're definitely committed to working with local schools in terms of one, just creating awareness and education around the site itself. There's a lot of community members who may not know that this site exists and is there. Even though right now it's not something that can be visited per se, but just creating, whether it's working with some schools and creating a curriculum, or adding to their curriculum, some kind of, information, some kind of a day in which the classes or the youth are educated on the history of the site and the site itself. So we are definitely, looking for those kind of partnerships with the community in terms of local schools and local nonprofits as well, who can be allies in, in educating the community and helping us do outreach. I think that as the project moves along, we'll have more opportunities for more direct, engagement. As I said, this is still very early on, and a lot of the work is very sensitive work. The archaeological excavations is very sensitive work, and we want to make sure that the community is aware and informed, but that it's managed and handled in a way that is respectful and proper to the site and to the kind of work that needs to happen. But we are, as always, looking for ways in which to, just make sure that people are aware that this project exists in the community, that this is something that is there, that it's present, that, it's not something that continues to be ignored. And I think the Harlem African Burial Ground Task Force has been great partners in that advocacy and building that awareness. And then to the second part about the housing component, I'm not 100% sure. I'm not sure if someone from our EDC team, from the project team, is on the call who can best answer that. Again, I think the housing component is still very far out. But what I do believe is that, we are committed to having that 80% affordability. And I don't know if someone from the project team is on the call who can speak a little bit more to that, but otherwise I can, investigate that further and get back to you.
Yeah, I think the breakdown, I think is I don't have it in front of me either, but definitely it was consulted and it was part of the conversations before the land use vote was taken. So probably looking back, Fernando, at some of the historical information, I think the breakdowns may be there. You could provide to the task to the land use committee. And Beverly, to what you were speaking, this is the process of this task force. The burial ground is well over 15 years at this point, I would dare say. And early on, right, Reverend, if
Yes.
we started this a long time ago, and
Yes.
along the way, there was a lot of conversations with the community. Different folks were brought in to participate and lend their knowledge to the task force. A very exhaustive website was developed that could be used as an educational, it has a lot of educational and research material. There was the forum that was described by Fernando, like an exhibit. There's been conversations with the community throughout the course of the operation of the task force, but since obviously the COVID and just slightly before that, things have tapered down a bit. But as the project moves forward, obviously our interest is to continue to engage the community and to maximize the opportunities that this project presents for young people, like you're alluding to, right, in the schools or apprenticeship programs. That's something that we always advocate for with the developers, is to create opportunities for the community. So those are expectations that we've set forth. And now as the project moves forward, as the RFPs come out, as the RFEIs come out, all of that will be memorialized in the document that developers and that cultural operators have to respond to. So that those community givebacks will be there. And the points of agreement that Fernando alluded to also does provide a breakdown of what the expectations of this project are and what the commitments that were made are. So that's something that probably could be shared as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. Thank you, Melissa. It's really good information, especially, since this project has been halted for so long, it definitely is important for those of us, even myself, just coming in, to be updated and get some of the information. And like, I agree with you where I'm just writing down homework, right? I'm writing down the Reverend's dissertation. This is also some recommendations to the committee members of some actions that we could do to further educate ourselves so we could be prepared for making those requests and being informed in decisions, right? I like the dissertation that the Reverend presented earlier. There was the other act, there's a URLIP. This URLIP is already completed, so it's a bit of a memorialized document. We can ask district manager to acquire that, and then definitely if Fernando could get us some of the things that Melissa advised to get about with affordability and things of that nature. That definitely
Angel may
help
have
us.
it as well.
I agree. Thank you. I just have, before I do have a question, but I do want to see, I believe I saw Jessica Morris's hand.
Angel's hand is also up.
Okay. Angel.
A question for EDC. So this project, the last time we were hearing movement on it was, quite a number of years ago. This is like the first update we've had in a while. It's needless to say, a very exciting and interesting project. Those of us that have been doing this, or those of us that are on the call, are kind of in the know. The rest of the community that isn't participating isn't in the know as much. I think I'd like to suggest that it would be a good idea to have to consider perhaps posting a sign or signs at the site, just alerting folks that are passersby that this is the future site of the Harlem African Burial Ground. Right, like a lot of folks don't know the work that's gone into it. A lot of folks don't know what's coming. Not every community has one of these, right? It's an incredible site that we will have develop and available to the community once it's up and going. The other thing is more of it's a question. Since we're doing this pre-development phase has to complete before we get to RFEI and then RFP. Do you have a ballpark kind of estimation as to how long the pre-development part may be, or is it a bit open-ended given the sensitivity of the archaeological piece?
Yeah, well, thank you for the recommendation for the signage. That's definitely something that we're open to discussing, especially with the task force. And one of the things I will flag is right to the right of this project is the Harlem Greenway, which will be under construction or is under construction. It's finalizing design and will be entering construction hopefully sometime next year. And so part of this conversations is we are aware, like building upland connections from the Greenway, that will connect to this future site, right? So thinking ahead, if we're constructing out this Greenway, we should have upland connections that people who are on the Greenway can get off and land right next to or right in front of this future site, and having some kind of signage or some kind of reference to this site on the Greenway itself, right? Whether it's a signage, green, site is here, or some kind of what do you call it, those little things that you see on the Greenway sometimes that show like this is down the block was the site of the Harlem African Burial Ground. So we are having those kind of conversations about how it'll be a long time before something is actually there, physically there, visible. So how can we kind of build that awareness through other projects or other means throughout the community? So that's definitely something that we are in conversation and considering. And then to your second question about estimated pre-development, we suspect that or expect that the archaeological excavation and demolition will take anywhere between 2 to 3 years. The archaeological excavation probably won't start to sometime next year. We're currently in the early planning and design process of preparing for the excavations. And as you can imagine, it's something that we're working very closely with the task force to understand what is going to be the process when remains are founded, the storage. There's just a lot of conversations and processes that have that are going to happen during that time, and then the actual demolition of the site itself, right? And that in itself entails some time. So we expect that this timeline could be anywhere between 2 to 3 years, more or less.
Okay, thank you, Fernando.
Most of us will be done with our term on the board by then.
Well,
Thank you
hopefully
for
still
that
community
update.
members.
Thank you. Oh, definitely. I don't disagree with you. Angel definitely caught my question. I would just piggyback. What other agencies, the administrative agencies, city, state, and federal, are involved in this project? Just out of interest, I think it would be good information. So then that board, not just the committee members, but the community, our fellow constituents, that we could direct them, that might show interest for the various concerns and subject matters relative to this project.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I think, obviously EDC, the Harlem African Burial Task Force, and then in terms of other city agencies, we have the DCLA, which is the Department of Cultural Affairs, is also kind of an interagency partner. And I think as of right now on the city level, those are kind of the between EDC and us. And then at some point, obviously city planning, we went through ULIP with them, and they'll be involved in the process as well. But I think we are kind of the main city agencies. And task force, please feel free to correct me if there are others that I'm missing out, or on the state level.
Well, now that you have the MTA signing over the depot, then yes, it seems like you are. EDC is the primary agency.
Right.
If this is Lauren Wolf, I wanted to add also, of course, we have Landmarks and SHPO, which is the state authority. Like, they're actually the first people we're going to interact with as we do the archaeological work. And of course, importantly, we have HPD, who's going to provide all the financing to the housing. They're very important too. So, those are key. Landmarks and LPC, like, we worked with them on the first stage of the archaeological work. They're totally on board with, what's happening next. HPD, of course, we'll be working with on figuring out the financing for the project.
Thank you, Lauren. I completely forgot about the housing component, and HPD and Landmarks, of course, are super important stakeholder, especially at this point in the process.
Well received. Thank you all for the information. Jessica Morris.
Thanks, Jason. I guess I've got two questions, and I'm glad we covered the alphabet soup. I think what's so sensitive here in the kind of the exhuming of human remains and honoring that site is really important. My question, one is geared more towards EDC as the lead agency in managing the redevelopment, and the other one is, I think, more geared towards the Harlem African Burial Ground Task Force. So first for EDC, this site is the sort of pinnacle of where so many points of long-standing investment are intending to come together. And I think, many of us are aware of how special this place is because of that context and ground that will be preserved and honored. The sort of forefronting of a cultural partner, a cultural operator, that's not typically the way that EDC rolls out RFPs, in my understanding. The sort of process blip that has happened, is that purely a function of the global pandemic? Or are there other challenges of trying to have this be a culturally led development process? That's my EDC question. The other point of connection that I'm curious about for the task force is Manhattan specifically has also an African Burial Ground National Monument downtown. the Harlem African Burial Ground is a different place and represents a different cultural history that was lost and then found. Is there intention to connect to the existing monument and historic place downtown in further memorializing the cultural legacy that exists in East Harlem? So one question about process, and it's a similar challenge, I think, that's happening at La Marqueta with a different set of players. And I think of what happened down in the Lower East Side with the Essex Market redevelopment and the length of time of those development processes relative to the quality of the outcomes, which I think we all want to see maximized, but perhaps not necessarily at the expense of generations worth of waiting. It's important to do it right, but the process, if untested, can be messy. So cultural operator first, is that
Thank you, Jessica. I got
continuing
it.
to be
You're
the
right.
strategy?
First question
Thanks,
for EDC, second question for Harlem African Burial Ground.
Lauren, do you want to take the first question?
Sure. So I guess it definitely wasn't because of the pandemic, because we started the process before the pandemic. In terms of, do we solicit for a cultural operator before? We definitely solicit for cultural operators sometimes. In fact, Fernando and I are working on another project with the cultural operator. Yeah, I guess, I mean, I think the crux of your question was, did we do it this way because of the pandemic? No, we did it this way because the cultural operator is, critically important to the project. And now we are doing it, we're doing this additional work because we think that'll be helpful in securing the cultural operator.
Sorry, just to clarify, it's understood that the forefronting the cultural operator and starting the process with that RFEI predated the pandemic. I'm wondering if the disruption, revoking that RFEI, canceling that RFEI, was purely a function of the pandemic disruption, or whether it was because there was, say, a lack of interest or ability of cultural operators to take that lead in the process. It's a huge ask of cultural institutions to lead a development process in that kind of way. So I'm sort of posing that question as a challenge and the best effort that I think we all want to see a sort of an optimal set of outcomes. It makes sense, but is it feasible? Are you going to, do you intend to continue to stick to that strategy of leading with a cultural operator, or is it up in the air?
If I can add, I don't think you have, I think there might be a misunderstanding. The cultural operator is not taking the lead in any way with the housing development piece. It's two completely separate issues, right? So the cultural operator is coming on first because of the importance of the burial ground, and that project is going to be the center of this whole development, and having that voice and representation in there at that point. But the housing piece and the developer selection, that is not something that the cultural operator is is involved in or will have a role in. I mean, I think Lauren, right? If that's correct, if you can clarify that part too.
Sure. So we released the RFEI for the cultural operator. And I think now due to both COVID and the fact that it was a lift to ask the cultural operator to be part of this project for so long while the archaeological work was going to be going on, that led us to cancel it and to develop the strategy of undertaking the archaeological work ourselves. We had actually thought that like a developer might undertake the archaeological work, but now our new plan is for us to do it, and then go to the point of selecting both a developer and a cultural operator after this work is done. And when because we don't know how long it'll take, and we need, once we start the archaeological work, we're going to do it for as long as it takes, but it's just hard to estimate how long that'll take because of the extent of the remains and and what have you. So, but after it's done, it becomes, there's more clarity on timing, and it's easier to get a cultural operator to participate. But yes, Melissa's absolutely right. What's happening is a developer is going to build a space for the cultural operator to operate. They're gonna build out a space in the ground floor of a building, and that is going to be where the cultural operator is. It's not that the cultural operator is expected to do any sort of level of development.
Thank you for the clarification. So it was a shift in strategy, and that's much appreciated. Thank you.
Sure.
The second part about connecting to the other existing African burial ground downtown, is this distinct and separate and not to be confused with in any sort of way, or is there a shared interest?
I mean, and the Reverend can answer as well, but that may be, something that once the cultural operators identified could pursue. That would be a much longer conversation. That's a whole federal oversight over the downtown project. It's a whole bunch of different agencies, a lot more bureaucracy. This is something that we're doing at a city level and with active participation from the city, who wants to see this done as well. So right now, our interest is first and foremost to keep the space sacred, memorialize it, have a cultural operator that can then set up a cultural center, an educational center that will educate the community and be like a little mini museum of sorts, to really preserve it and maintain it. If as part of the long-term vision, there's a way of connecting the two, obviously that would be of great interest. I think it'd be valuable to have that, but that would be a longer term project. That's the way I would see it. Reverend, I don't know if you.
Yes, that's a very, very good question. Initially, when I sought to do my research on partners and information as to how do I go about informing the community and completing my research, I did go to the Lower Manhattan African Burial Ground and spoke to the officials there. That is on federal land. They have the federal building that's on top of it. And they were the ones that guided me into this process, introduced me to other stakeholders who in turn became early members of the task force and helped guide this whole process. So they were early aides to myself and the task force members, but no longer, because this is a city entity. And they were federal entity. But from time to time, I do go and ask them questions and guidance. But Melissa is correct.
Thank you all for the incredible stewardship.
And I've said it better myself, Jessica. Thank you. Thank you all for the answers, the responses. Thank you, Madam Speaker, coming back and educating us on the status. Fernando from the EDC, very much appreciative on the update. I think what I'm hearing collectively before we get it, just so that way we could get to a close and go on to the next presentation, is we probably would like to hear, an anticipated schedule. We heard some milestones that we threw out there, and I think that if possible, if EDC could get us a, just something small, it doesn't have to be committable, but something that shows the 2 to 3 years for the archaeological study, some of the other items. So then that way, for our succession, we could transfer that information effectively and keep the committee and the community apprised to continue to assist and to support the works and efforts that, that we all came towards, right? Because this ULUP was approved and was reviewed many, many moons ago. So we're just making sure it's still happening. So thank you. Beverly.
Yes, thank you, Chair. To piggyback off of what Angel said regarding getting notices to the community about what's there. I think that's a great idea to have some type of signs, even getting some of the local artists to do murals on the building or whatever, to beautify it a little bit, so people can know that it's there. So if that's something that can be done, as soon as possible, to let people know what's there, to keep this in the forefront of the community, that this site exists in our community, and we're looking forward to making it part of a museum or something like that. And we have some ideas to work it. I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly, for the recommendation. So we have a few acts. We'll definitely follow up. Appreciate everyone for sharing their time, and we're excited to see, the project progress. And again, thank you all for your efforts.
Thank you, Community Board 11, for inviting us to present today, and we will follow up to those requests. Thank you so much.
Angel, our next presenter.
Jennifer Maldonado with the Educational Construction Fund. Jennifer, do you have slides? I can hear you better if you're not muted.
I thought you muted me.
No. I only mute Jason.
I do not. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I do not have slides.
I'm sorry, Jennifer. Just hold 1 second. I apologize. Speaking of muting, could somebody mute because you're back feeding? It'd be greatly appreciated.
Can I start, Jason? Do you want to? Okay. Hi, my name is Jennifer Maldonado. I am the chairman and CEO of the Educational Construction Fund, ECF. I'm here with an update on a project that's been stalled for approximately, I would say, 5 years, almost 5 years now. Our ECF at Co-op Tech 96th Street project. I don't have slides with me today, and I hopefully plan to come back to you very quickly and soon, as we are contemplating, or we're working on how to move forward with the project, given that the project has ballooned by about 10 to 12% over the last 5 years. As many of you probably know, we have been in litigation with members of the Upper East Side community that have objected to the project for various reasons. The alienation of the JOP, which is a jointly operated playground, the height and scale of the project being their major concerns. But that has been a real toll on what we had anticipated was starting a project in 2018. We had actually hoped to be at the conclusion of the school's rebuild by this point, but given the litigation, as well as COVID, as well as the increased pricing on the project, we have to think differently about the project. So at the beginning of the new administration, I spoke with Chancellor Banks about how we can address the obligation that was made to the schools themselves. This has always—
Jennifer, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I should have asked you this at the beginning, but we do have newer members, and it's been quite a while.
Oh,
if you could give us like the elevator pitch of what the project was.
Sure.
And then
sorry, but I wasn't sure who was actually attending the meeting, so I apologize on.
Yeah. Thanks.
So this project was bid out in 2012 as a project to rebuild the Co-op Tech School, which is based on 96th Street between 1st and 2nd Avenue, as well as, excuse me, reconstruct and rebuild the JOP, which is the jointly operated playground at 96th Street. For those of you who may not be familiar, a JOP is, as I said, a jointly operated playground, which is used by both Parks Department and the Department of Education for the purposes of filling two needs. One is the need for playgrounds at schools, and the second is the need for parks throughout the 5 boroughs. So these are a unique dual operational, dual controlled playgrounds throughout the city. And that playground in of itself has had not had any real reconstruction done, from what I understand, and I could be wrong, for over 20 years. And our project would also envision redoing that playground for use by the community and the school, how it's intended to be used. Included in the project, outside of the 3 schools, so Co-op Tech, the Park East High School, which is located on 105th Street, as well as Heritage High School on Lexington and 105th Street. These are 3 schools that are important to New York City and important to the community. Co-op Tech serves the technical expertise of many students throughout the 5 boroughs. Students are not just located in East Harlem, but throughout the city. They come to Co-op Tech for, again, vocational classes, automotive, welding, carpentry, things of that sort. And the other 2 high schools which are in the project are Park East High School and, again, Heritage High Schools. Both, I would say, are in compromised situations in the buildings that they currently are housed in. Heritage shares a building with the Budgos Cultural Center and Park East. And so there's constraints and difficulties with that school. First and foremost, there's no cafeteria. It's not accessible. There are a number of issues with that school building. And Park East High School, which is a very small, narrow school, has had overcapacity issues and then building specific issues as well. So with the real forethought by the previous speaker, Melissa Mark-Viverito, who may be still on the line, it really came to our attention that it wasn't just Co-op Tech that needed to be included in the kind of project we were looking at, but the 2 schools that actually reside in East Harlem. As many of you may or may not know, there has not been a new DOE public school, high school built in East Harlem for over 50 years. So rightly so, the former speaker really encouraged us to add these 2 schools to the project. But just to jump ahead now, as I said, we've been locked in litigation by Upper East Side opponents for about 5 years. It's really made it so the project has tremendous difficulties in meeting all of its obligations. With that, as I started to say, I met with the Chancellor, Chancellor Banks, early on in his administration, and stressed the importance of, if not everything if we could not do the project, we still have to meet the obligations for Heritage and Park East. And so that's what we've been working on for over the last, I would say the beginning, end of late last year. Myself and SCA have been in pursuit of a building in East Harlem that could house Park East and Heritage. We have not found such a building yet. It's, as you probably all know better than anyone else, finding 140,000 square feet of developable property in East Harlem without dislocating businesses and community members has been challenging for us. There's 1 or 2 sites that could potentially be feasible. It's nothing I can speak to you about because obviously negotiations are what they are. But they're both challenged sites as well. The rents in East Harlem have ballooned, as you've probably all seen. And so leasing a site is cost prohibitive, because in the 5 years you can lease a site, you can buy a property. But, you know, where's the balance there, and in what is, where we have to sort of take a site, you know, and we've given ourselves really till the end of the summer to come up with a site or two. I will tell you that we have brokers working diligently to try to find something. I would ask if there's anyone that knows of available space, that if Angel, if you don't mind, if they would reach out to you and you could reach out to me. We have eyes, ears everywhere. But in order to accommodate, again, 2 schools in one building, which is the desire, which is really where we have always thought that these 2 schools who work so closely together and can share space would be the best opportunity for these schools. So we're still looking, you know, but at the same time, in the beginning of the year, the last few months, obviously, I've been talking with Avalon Bay, who is still committed to the project, about how moving these 2 schools out of the project allow the project to move forward. We would have to do a redesign of the project, as you can anticipate, with the notion that this may allow for a different conception of what the buildings look like. And I think that's something that we could all be very pleased about. You know, at the end of the day, it's not going to get taller. Let's put it that way. But all the obligations that are within the project, the local hiring, the affordable hiring, the rebuild of the playground, the local vendors, things of that sort, all of that is still within the project. But, you know, we've gone, and I'm sort of circling around, but we've gone from a project that was estimated at, you know, $900 million to, you know, we're at, I believe, 10% increase or 12% increase. So, you know, at $1 billion. That's a heavy cost for a project that has all of these, you know, obligations / benefits to the community. So that's where we are. I didn't bring new slides. And again, I apologize, Angel, happy to come back next, you know, for your next meeting, because the slides in some ways will look the same, because we haven't changed the massing. We haven't changed anything like that. I would love to have, I was talking with SCA right before I left. I would love to have come up with, you know, we have a building and we're going to do this, but we are going to do this. And it's been, and again, you can ask the chancellor, this was the first thing I spoke to him about. So it is on his radar. It's on the radar of the head of SCA, Lorraine Grillo, who is at, she's the first deputy mayor. She's very involved in this as well. So it's an all hands on deck effort, and we'll move ahead with Co-op Tech and envisioned differently, and we'll meet our obligations to Heritage and Park East. And we're hopefully going to fulfill that, all of that, you know, within some time in the future. So that's really, I was here more to answer any questions. I know I haven't given you much, but I'm trying to be respectful of all the work and time that you've put into it, and these kids put into helping us get through the Euler process. You know, these kids are in college now, which is just mind-boggling to me. But the things that were said still resonate, that the kids said, that this was always going to be for their brothers or sisters or their younger siblings, you know, so we're hoping to make it still happen.
Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate your informational update. That being said, do we have questions? Let's start with the committee. Angel.
Thanks, Jason, and thanks, Jennifer. So you said, I think, I'm paraphrasing, we're still doing this,
Yeah.
but the this is different now, because the two other schools are no longer part of the this at
Correct.
this site anyway.
Correct.
So then the project at that site, just to be clear, and I think I know the answer, but just to be clear, is going to be significantly different because it was significantly different from how it was originally envisioned before the other two schools were added. Now those schools are back out, so now we're back to a different vision, right?
I mean, we have to work within the ULURP approvals, massing there. You're right that there's going to be, you know, 2 fewer schools in the project. Will have to be envisioned in a different way. But with the caveat, and I think it's important for everyone to understand that the way that ECF works is that co-op tech has to come down before anything else. Because, I'm sorry, scratch that. The new co-op tech has to be built before the
co-op tech goes
down. So and I think you and I spoke about it, and I know I brought this up to the committee, and again, happy to talk in much more detail about it next time. It has to be masked in a certain way. So you have to do, you know, the 2nd Avenue corner first and build a new school, and then move those kids before you can demolish co-op tech and then move everything around. So it's a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle. But to your main question, and I'm sorry I ran through, but your main is that yes, we will be redesigning it in a different way.
Okay, and with the other 2 schools not being contemplated for this site anymore, sorry, my dogs are going crazy, for this site anymore, Avalon Bay doesn't have any role with those other 2 schools, right? So that's just fully back in the city's hands.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Angel. Thank you. I do agree with Angel. Jennifer, this is, I probably just started on the board when this first came in front of us. So, and roles have definitely changed since then. So I do appreciate the update, and I do look forward to you coming back and keeping us apprised. And I think what we're alluding to, right, before we get into some of the members of the public is we want to be involved. We want to make sure that the commitments that were set forth during the ULURP process are being fulfilled, and more importantly, that you have the support that's necessary to see that our youth are, you know, obtaining an education that's required. You know, I found it appalling that you said, you know, in East Harlem with the amount of development, and I think how much is MTA right now for 2nd Avenue subway? $1 billion project of investment, you know, to get people from 1st Avenue to 3rd, but you know, we're still talking about building a school for the kids. And I'm not 50, so that means before I was born, right? So
no, and I think that's one of the hard parts of this is that, you know, the school portion in and of itself is, you know, 350, 400 million, you know, so that is a reality that we need to address, and this is a vehicle to address it. This is what we need to do. But you're right at the same time, you know, that if we do nothing else, we have to meet that commitment obligation to the schools, because that is first and foremost, it's the underpinning of what ECF does, but it is the underpinning of the city. So you have my full, you know, attention on those 2 schools.
Before I go to some of the other members, just again, same edification like last time to members of the public. This has been sidelined or dormant whatever term, paused, halted for a long time. So I automatically advise that, I'm speaking out loud because I'm telling myself this, go back, look at the ULIP application approved by City Council, go back, look at CB11's position at full board on this item, and let's ensure that we see what needs to be, what was promised originally versus we're already being advised that there's going to be some modifications in the forefront. So it's better to be educated so that we could pivot correctly, right? And be fluid and flexible. Before I go to the public, I see Mr. James.
Thank you. Jennifer, thank you for coming. I do have a question about, when you were here back in 2016, you talked about that Marx Brothers Playground was being alienated because out of an abundance of caution, and that you believed that it was not a park, but that you were alienating it because the MTA alienated a portion of it when they used it for staging for the Second Avenue subway. Is that still your opinion of Marx Brothers and other JOPs? One of the reasons I'm asking is that there are 8 other JOPs in East Harlem, and what should the understanding of the status of those sites be, or do you not have an opinion on that?
I don't know if I have an opinion. I have, I'll state that I still agree that that was the timeline of how this JOP came to be alienated. So it's not an opinion, it's fact. I guess your last question I'll answer, and I don't remember the second one. I'm not sure about any status. The JOPs are not changing status from what I understand. So they will continue to be parks/playgrounds. And I'm sorry, I didn't catch your second. I don't know if there was a second question.
Well, it's just whether, earlier you had said that you had believed that, or that was the position of ECF that JOPs were not parks, but this one was being alienated because of what happened with the MTA. And I guess I'm asking, are JOPs parks?
They are in a special classification. So they are considered playgrounds and parks, and they have a special classification. I think we both know that, George. Whether or not we agree with how they're classified is, a question for lawyers, and lawyers have been debating this. But again, that was.
Well, I think your opinion is much more important than mine.
It's not an opinion, though, but it's not an opinion. I'm going on the facts of the case, so.
Okay, I mean, just for the committee, it's just that, there are these 8 other jointly operated playgrounds in East Harlem, and I think there is question as whether they would need to be alienated to be used for another purpose or not. And I don't know the answer to that question. And I was hoping to get at least some sort of clarity. I think it's still an open question. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Sounds like we all got some more homework to do. So I appreciate that insight, right? For the jointly operated parks. Agreed. I don't know what it is, right? And I've been building in New York for a long time. And dealing with developers and designers on a lot of these types of designations. So I'm interested as well. That being said, any other panelists? I do not see any. Miss Beverly Pavone. Sorry. We'll get to you soon, public, I promise. I feel bad because all of their hands were raised the longest. And let's, again, germane and succinct to the discussion. If we got some questions for homework, I think you kind of catch it, right? Let's do our homework. Not to you, Ms. Pavone, but just in general. Go ahead.
No, I actually have to do some homework on it because I didn't know there was 8 other JOPs in the East Harlem. I would like to know what those locations are and what they're used for, So yeah, I do have some homework, and I actually making my notes and putting the initials homework next to some of these issues.
Really, do you want me to, you can go to Parks and they can give you the list of all of the jointly operated playgrounds.
Okay,
So that you can get that information from Parks. And
okay, thank you very,
they operate as school property and Parks property, so. But you can get more details.
And we got the
Yeah.
chair of the Parks Committee on
Yep.
our committee, so we definitely could circle back on that. But go ahead, Beverly, I know you had a question. I was teasing a little bit.
yes.
These things get dry after a while, right? We've already been here for an hour and 10 minutes, so you know.
Yeah, my question is regarding the statement that East Hall, the east side of 96th Street in that area was giving you some type of pushback regarding the design of the housing. Did I hear that correctly? And if they are having an issue about the type of buildings, because I remember going to some of the meetings, and one of the pushbacks was the height of the building and the shadows that it was causing on the community buildings that was there. So I just want to know if y'all still having some issues with that part of the district saying no to the development, or are they for the development?
No, they are not for the development. They have been the ones that have litigated against us for the last 5 years. I think they have multiple reasons. I think some of them may be on the line as well, so they can probably explain it a little bit better than I can. But my understanding is that they question the ULURP decision as a whole. They question the alienation of the jointly operated playgrounds. They question the use of the playgrounds, the closure, temporary closure of the playground, the height of the building. I think those are their main arguments with the project.
Thank you, Jennifer.
I think that's, yeah, that's what I remembered. I think that's the first time I met or heard of George doing a presentation for anything, and I was like, oh man, I like this guy here because he got a lot of information about how buildings are done. So thank you very much for that information.
Thank you, Beverly. Moving on to the public. Jessica Morris, then Nilsa Rama, then Elsie Encarnacion, and then Marie Winfield. Let's keep it in 2 minutes if possible.
Thank you, Jason. And I'm in good company here in the public, so I'll keep it brief. I think, Jennifer, thank you for coming to us with an update. I joined the board essentially immediately after this was passed for something that was a package deal with an incredible amount of investment in schools that is sorely needed in East Harlem. It is disconcerting to say the least, JOP aside, that is now no longer a part of the package. It's also concerning, I believe the lawsuit, if I'm mistaken, please correct me, but was advanced by Municipal Art Society and Carnegie Hill Neighbors. And I'm not sure that there's been much consultation from those parties with the broader East Harlem community. And for the record, I live on 2nd Avenue, about 4 blocks from the site. So dead of winter, I may be in the shadow, depending on how tall is not any taller. As far as a question, you are a representative of the corporate entity, Education Construction Fund. Is that specific to the redevelopment of this site? And what is the overall partnership relative to the redevelopment of the full block?
Right.
With regard to kind of your piece of ownership versus your development partners in the process?
So the New York City Education Construction Fund is a state public authority that was created in 1966 with the sole mission of building New York City public schools through public-private partnerships. So we're not a corporate entity. just for clarification. And through the enacting legislation, ECF uses city property, and with the intent that the use of that property goes towards, again, the development of schools through the mixed use process. I'm sorry, I may have missed another question that you had.
Yeah, the main question is with the removal of in my mind, and I know there was a long history, and I stand in the position of JOP aside, even though that is a precedent-setting part of the forward motion of the redevelopment, the removal of the enormous school component from the redevelopment of this site, how can that not change the ULURP permission?
So the ULURP is based on the massing of the entire block. So it does not hinge on the schools being part of it. So we just have to work within the envelope.
So there's no commitment to use classification within that ULURP passage?
I do not believe so, but I will double check that. I'm sorry, I actually have to do some homework again and read read the decision again, but specific to the schools themselves. But the commitment in our development agreements and all of our agreements are that the schools the obligation to the schools are met. So we will be meeting the obligations to Heritage and Park East and Co-op Tech. So while Heritage and Park East, and just to take a little bit of step back, we're in sort of the third phase of the project. So even if we were to start today, they would not be able to move into a school for another 10 years, which is horrifying. But we are dedicated and obligated to finding a new site for Heritage and Park East, which will undoubtedly come online before the Co-op Tech project is completed. So while we are not meeting it within the square footage of the site, we are meeting it elsewhere.
Without any time constraints of that obligation?
No, it has nothing to do in some ways with the progress on 96th Street. This will be once there's a site and the paperwork is done, SCA would start fitting out or constructing the new site. So within the course of signing a new site, it could potentially take about 3 years to build a new school, give or take.
And thank you for coming to us. I know you're not the bad guy, but the bearer of news that makes the entire thing very.
Well, we're trying to, Jessica, meet it in other ways. And yes, you're right. It's incredibly, I've worked really hard on this, and it's incredibly unfortunate that it's taken this long, more than anything. But we will meet all the obligations within the plan as we brought to you. So we will meet the obligations of the schools, of the housing, of the local hiring. All of those matters will still be, all those obligations will still be met.
Thank you. And just for the record, my question that you can't answer, I know, but I do want to pose it, is the sort of legal objections from Municipal Art Society and Carnegie Hill neighbors did not, that's the south side of 96th Street talking.
Correct.
I'm talking and I'm muted. I'm sorry. I gave you so many compliments, Jessica. Great discussion between the two of you, but long story short, yes, we have homework to do. In particular, for those that are interested in being a part of the discussion, it's always good to, from our position as board members and making sure we have the interests of our constituents forefronted, that we be unbiased and hear from all parties. So, definitely something we should continue to look forward to do. No, sir.
Hello, Chair. How are you? Jennifer, I was part of the board and still am part of the board when this came up in front of us. And one of the contentious points was about the height of the buildings, and what sold a lot of the community board members was the fact that 3 schools would be renovated or relocated. I'm just trying to remember, I thought that there was a 4th program or potentially a 4th school that might have had to do with disabilities. Mentioned at one point.
Yeah, what you're talking about is the current co-op tech. During all of these, during our project discussions, co-op tech through the Department of Education opened up a small unit, which is called the Julia Richmond School program. They're still there. I'm not, excuse me. I'm not quite sure how many, how many students are in that project, but they right now, I think they are on the 4th floor of the current co-op tech, but it's a separate program.
Okay, so is that program going to be relocated when the co-op tech building is designed?
I'm not, well, the design is not.
Well, not designed, when it's rebuilt. Is that program going to be housed within co-op tech?
I can't tell you that for sure either way. I think, programmatically, that's not something that is my specialty. And things change constantly. So, in 3 to 5 years, I couldn't be able to tell you what the, if that school's still going to be there.
Yeah, because that was one of the selling points.
Yeah.
To be honest, remembering my experience and how contentious this was, this project. The thing that sold some of the board members that I remember was when high schoolers came from Landmark and to sell the fact that of the need. So the fact that this is very unfortunate because board members voted on it based on that at that time. And so if this changes, it's going to be interesting to see how this community feels on something that was voted on with a specific intent to then now try to figure out piecemeal how to service these young people. But it's a pleasure seeing you, Jennifer.
I agree, Nelsa. And that's, again, the bedrock are the schools. And that's what we're, really focused on right now.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Welcome.
Elsie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. It's good to see Villanueva back in that chair position. So I had a question in regards to, I just wanted to be clear. So the main reason why we are not having those 2 additional schools in this space was due to the inflation and the cost.
Correct.
The 10% piece. Okay, so what do we have a number, and what exactly is the number of monies that will be allocated for the new buildings of the school?
For the building and co-op tech, it goes by the amount of the square footage cost. So for co-op tech, it's about 170 million. That's more because the school is a double reinforced school, unlike a regular classroom, because they do specialized trades. So their cost is a little heavier. For the co-op tech, for the Park East and Heritage School, it's approximately 140,000 square feet or so. And we're looking at about all costs in probably $40 million.
Okay, and then, and so we're assuming that we're gonna find a space for that amount of money and it won't be able to go over, right? Because that's the reason why we're not putting it.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying, I'm just giving you approximates, you know,
Approximately.
there's other factors, you know, that come into play in terms of where things, what they're willing, what we can, where we have wiggle room. So
Yeah.
giving approximates.
Okay, and then is there a timeline on the new proposal or the new configuration or how it'll?
No,
kind of-
not yet. I'll tell you, we're starting to meet more often with Avalon Bay and all the legal teams and what have you. I would hope, Angel, I'm sorry, I can't remember anybody's name right now. When is your next board meeting?
Our next land use committee meeting is on the 8th, June 8th.
June 8th. If I don't have an update, then I'll send a note or but if I don't have something more filled out, I would hope by July, I could have a little more meat on the bone in terms of what we're thinking.
Okay, and just
I may reach out earlier just to, run some things by you folks.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is imperative, and I know it's been said a few times during this meeting. Nilsa just mentioned, one of the main selling points was the schools, and that was one of the reasons we were able to be okay with going at that height. And so, I would love for the height to come down. I'm not sure that that's something that you guys are envisioning, but just putting it out there, I think it's something that would definitely ease some of that that feeling around the community where we were thinking about one thing, we were kind of a hard pill to swallow, but we were able to kind of concede to that because of and I know we're still getting the schools, but within that project it's just going to look different. And so I'm hoping that difference does come in height and able to please some of the community. But with that, I'll leave it to the rest of the people here. Thank you for your time and for your answers.
Jason, if I can say something, please. So I am the council member that voted on this project and obviously took a lot of the pressure that was in the community. For those of you that have not visited either of these other schools that we're talking about, the ones that would be relocated here, Heritage, Park East, I would definitely ask people to go visit so you can see how our children are being severely deprived. So the idea of providing a space for them is critical. So I unfortunately had to step away for a minute. I'm going to review this recording to hear exactly how this plan has changed. But if those schools will not be located on site, I do not understand how this project, meaning Avalon Bay, would still get the same density and same height. And that would be of the utmost concern. You don't have to revisit it, John, right now, but I will talk to the board members. I will revisit, I will listen to see what things are going on. But, considering the community concerns around this project, if there's major alterations to the original configuration, I will definitely weigh in and talk to the council member and figure out how we can exercise and put a lot of pressure for that to change. The other thing, obviously, that I just want to remind some board members here who maybe were not part of those board hearings when they happened. It was very offensive to hear people south of 96th Street talking so derisively of our children. They might as well have just said, we don't want them here, because that is in essence what they were saying, that they didn't want our kids to be kind of hanging around and milling around in their area, right? Which is basically what they were saying in the public hearings. Our children all of our children deserve a quality education and deserve classrooms and space to be able to learn fully and reach their potential. So there was a lot of racism and classism that was laced within the hearing and the sentiment that were expressed by those who are still opposed to this project. And I think that needs to be stated, needs to be clear, that is part of their sentiment that has laced the opposition to this project as well. I don't want people to forget that. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Melissa. Well said. Marie.
Hi, Jason. How are you? I just have a short comment since there seems to be interest in board members who were not present at the time of doing their homework on this project. To me, this is a very ahistoric presentation in terms of the context, in terms of the concurrent neighborhood planning process and rezoning. And I would really just encourage people to actually speak to board members who were there at the time. Some of the alienation concerns originated at Community Board 11 in the Parks Committee itself in pre-meetings with ECF. So I do encourage you to get several different perspectives on how this project originated, how 3 schools ended up in the project in the first place. And I truly hope that the city can move forward in giving those 2 schools what they deserve.
Thank you, Marie. Good to hear from you. Xavier, then Angel.
Thank you very much, everyone who's commented on this and made formal inquiry. Jennifer, thank you for being in this space. I was there in that room. I was there during that process. And thank you for Marie for mentioning about getting multiple points of view, if you will, on the process, because I can tell you, I think nearly half of those members who were there on that day and voted on it and during the process are no longer on our board. And I think that's important to acknowledge. I know that it was contentious is a very diplomatic and polite word used in this instance. There was a lot of strong arming that happened throughout the process. People felt very impassioned about several issues, including ceiling height and also equity when it came to the placement of schools. At this point in time, if you cannot be at our land use meeting in June, executive committee is also an option for an update. I can, as I'm still in touch with many of those previous board members, I can tell you dollars to donuts. If they knew that these programs were being pulled because of CPI or and general inflation, knowing that that was a distinct and real possibility, they would not have voted to approve. The ceiling height again also being an issue. We have not had an equitable distribution of resources in our neighborhood, not just for decades, but for generations. And again, this is not, I know you're the messenger, but in this case, we would ask that you come forth at the next meeting with updates in Avalon Bay too, because we really need to find a tentative pathway forward to ensure not just that our youth are educated appropriately, but that we are maintaining our commitments, because otherwise it flies in the face of the ULURP process. So again, I implore you to return back to us with the data we need, because I think we're in somewhat of an uncharted territory. That being said, with the JOP, I think that the mentioning that it's for the lawyers to determine, I would most passionately disagree. I think it's not just for the lawyers to determine. I think it's for the legislators to determine in that process, so that we can really, any lack of clarity will lead to lawyers getting involved, and then no one really wins. And I think we can all agree on that. So with that, I will leave it with you, Angel. Jason, thank you for a good and productive meeting, and look forward to seeing you all out there doing the brilliant work.
You heard the homework there, right? We got more. Angel.
Jennifer, on the just going back to the idea of finding an alternate site for the 2 other schools, if a site is found, would that, since ECF's typical MO is to do a private-public partnership, would that still be, no? Let me finish answering and then you say no. No, so just in case someone's just listening and not looking.
No, I apologize.
Would it be would a public-private partnership be required to do those 2 buildings?
No.
And, okay. It would just be an SCA project.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Which, for those that don't know, SCA, that means DOE, means government, public. Anybody else? That was a lot. Thank you, Jennifer. Did well. Anybody else have any questions? I can't see the chat. I'm not even gonna look at the chat. So if there's no other questions, Jennifer, we look forward to you updating
Yes.
us in June. Please
Yes.
keep us apprised. I am gonna run, one of the best things that came up from my predecessor, another Mr. Villanueva, who is the chair land use, is to have a tracking sheet, right? And an action list. And we would love to, one, bring ourselves up to speed on some of the historical data from your side of the fence, as well as more importantly, understand what the position of the board and the efforts were in our district. And I heard a lot of support today. I don't know necessarily the sentiments you experienced, but I've heard from city council, previous city council members, other community board members that have a commitment of seeing this project fulfill the needs, which is servicing our children. So
Thank you very much for giving me all this time to participate. I really appreciate it. Just to reiterate everything, I personally run this organization and I'm committed to making these schools on par or better than the schools on the other side of 96th Street. So it's about space, it's about design, it's about quality, it's about these kids. So I'm dedicated to doing that. So I look forward to working with you folks again. So
Thank you, Jennifer.
okay, thank you. Have a good night.
good night. Angel, let's track that. That's something that I want to think about with a committee or a task force outside of this as well, to monitor that redevelopment. Next topic. Committee discussion on the 421A property tax exemption. More homework. We're gonna let Mr. Muscane give us a little brief update. Those of you who are full board, you got the full update, right, from our assembly. But it falls under land use, it affects land use, it affects our community. And hopefully we have enough time, if at all, to be able to respond. Not necessarily doesn't mean we need to respond for this law by then. Because there's always opportunity for conversations after, as it was stated by our chair, right? The work just doesn't happen here. It also happens with our legislators, right? But if we don't give them the information, or you heard some of the interest today about activating and being, coordinating with these elected officials on ensuring that the interest of all, I'm going to emphasize that because I love using that. Those of you who know me from SDN, and about equity, it's all about all of our constituents within our district, right? So we need to make sure that and the same is to be said here. I gave you my sentimental spiel on it. I'm gonna let Angel do his technical thing, and hopefully we could have some healthy conversation about it and what we would like to do next.
Sure. So thank you, Jason. So I don't know about all the technical stuff, but the 421A tax exemption, program, for those that don't know, is a tool, created by the state back in the early 70s to incentivize the development of housing. Right at the time, the concern was, well, there isn't, as much. There is a need for more housing, and there isn't enough housing being constructed. So we need to incentivize, real estate developers to build housing versus office buildings or whatever else they were interested in building. So this exemption was put in place that, this program was put in place that exempted these projects for a certain amount of time from having to pay property tax. I think it's 20, it's changed over the years, but I think initially it was 20 or 25. Then over the course of time, the program was altered a bit to focus it on supporting the development of affordable housing, right? Affordable housing being housing that's subsidized, not housing that's affordable to everyone, before someone says that. And the program has changed a couple of times, since then. So like in the 80s, I think was the first change. Then under de Blasio was the most recent change. Anyway, the program, tends to, will sunset next month. And Governor Hochul has proposed a revision of the program under a new name, 45W, but it's the same model, just with different, number targets in terms of affordability, in terms of the AMI targets that it's, looking to subsidize. In response to, the criticisms that have been, thrown at the program for years on end, that it's a giveaway to real estate, that the quote affordable housing that it is subsidizing isn't affordable to regular working folks, that it's subsidizing housing, at much too high a level. So the idea was to bring down the bands that would be subsidized under this tax exemption program. So like I said, it's set to sunset next month, and there's been discussion over the past few months under a lot of pressure from housing advocates that want it to either be scrapped or revised, and real estate interests that want it to be continued, right? Because it's in their interest. So Governor Hochul came up with this proposal with the intention of it being passed as part of the state's budget agreement. Thankfully, in my opinion, it wasn't. And now there's an opportunity for this conversation to be had during legislative session, where I believe, and a lot of other folks believe, it belongs. Conversations about policy and legislation should be had, as part of a legislative conversation, not a budget deal. So it's still an open question as to whether 421A, as it currently exists, will be renewed. Will it be revised, either in line with Governor Hochul's recommendation or another recommendation? Will it be allowed to sunset and die and then just reconsidered at another point? That's still a question. The reason that I suggested that this committee have a conversation or begin a conversation about the 421A program is because it's used, to develop housing, right? And at our board, we divide the housing question, housing to be developed. We have those conversations here, and land use and housing after it's built, the preservation of housing, we have on the housing committee. And there's been some conversation at the housing committee in the past couple of months about the 421A program. And there's been, clarity provided to that committee by invited presenters and housing policy experts from the Community Service Society and from the State Senate's Housing Committee. They came in and spoke to the committee and provided clarity on what 421A is, what the benefits are, clarity on it being a development tool, not a preservation tool. Because there are, some concern that the expiration of the program means an expiration of the exemption that their building currently has. That's not accurate, and thankfully that clarification was provided. So what I mean is, if your building, started to receive the benefit 20 years ago, and the benefits of 25 years, whether the program sunsets next month or not, you continue to receive the exemption until the end of the term of the exemption that was granted to your building. A important question that was brought up at the Housing Committee that I think is something that the Housing Committee should be pursuing, and I've advised as much, is the question of preservation for individuals that are, living in units that benefited from 421A. For units that, rental units, after the exemption, those units are covered by rent stabilization. So depending on the rent for that unit, you're covered, there for the duration. For homeownership units, there is no such protection. So once that exemption is done, then you're on the hook to pay your property tax like everyone else. Concern there, though, is that in certain scenarios, for example, individuals that are living on fixed incomes, will, are rightfully fearful of what, the expiration of that exemption is going to mean for them and their ability to remain in their homes. There are programs that exist to aid seniors and other folks living on fixed incomes with their property tax bills. And that's something for the Housing Committee to pursue and help advise, our constituents that find themselves with that question. But on the development piece, I think it's something for this committee to consider what, if anything, it wants to advocate for in terms of, affordable housing subsidy programs, incentive programs, such as 421A. Does it want to support what exists? Does it want to propose a revision? Does it want to advocate with its state representatives and to the governor on positions that this board feels should be supported by our legislative representatives, positions that reflect the needs of our community? The last thing I'll say is that the current 421A program and the income bands or the income limits that it subsidizes are far above what the local median income is. And though we know, of course, that not everyone in our district lives at the median, we have folks below, we have folks above, it is important to keep in mind that that median is awfully important to so many in our community that, because of the income that they are, the incomes that they have for their household, they're less competitive on the open market. So, but for, appropriate subsidy, they're kind of on their own, and they don't, they're not, they don't have the options that someone with a higher income would have. And that's not a slight on anyone with a higher income. It's just a matter of priority and prioritizing limited resources to aid those that have the highest need instead of those that don't have quite as high a need. So if you're subsidizing units at 130% of AMI, that's 100% more than our local AMI, right? That's wild. And it's at 130 and not touching us at 30. So I think that that's something for the committee and the board to consider, like a decision does not have to be made tonight, of course. Like Jason alluded to, State Senator Cordero Clear, who has, a long history of work in the housing policy field, spoke at our last, shared her thoughts on the 421A program at our last full board meeting. We did extend an invitation to the senator to attend tonight. Unfortunately, she had a number of conflicts and was not able to make it, but has committed to come to our next land use committee meeting. So, there's an opportunity to continue the conversation with the senator there. And I think that, we, again, should be, if we do come to a position, encouraging our state reps and our governor to advocate for policies and programs that are reflective of the needs of this district. That's all I got.
That was beautifully said, Angel. Thank you.
Beautifully said. Oh, thank you so much.
It made my life easier. Which is, it goes back to the moral of the story, homework. All right, let's go. Committee, anybody got any, conversation, discussion? If we got questions, I think for me, if I got a question, that means I got to go read the law, just to be open with that, right? I do think that this stuff does get real heavy. So those that are informed, please inform us. And those that have suggestions, let's suggest.
Jason, I neglected to say one thing. I did reference the Housing Committee and those presentations that were given by those policy experts. I strongly encourage board members that to find the time to watch the recording of that meeting. It was an excellent and very informative presentation by two leading housing policy experts. We don't get those folks every day, and we got them in the same meeting. And the committee posed a lot of, good questions. The answers were provided in detail. A lot of different perspectives were, addressed during that presentation, so I strongly encourage you to watch that. It was the April Housing Committee meeting, if I'm not wrong. And there was a presentation by Sam Stein from Community Service Society and Hallie Chu from Brian Kavanaugh's office at the state legislature.
Thank you, Angel. Those of you who don't know, you could check the website or the YouTube channel. I find the YouTube channel to be like my easy resource, especially when I'm not able to make a meeting. So I definitely will increase our likes for the housing committee so that way they could go viral. It's a joke for some. I'm sorry that I see that
It's just been me and Beverly watching the videos over and over.
No, it's me too. I promise. I promise. I can't see some of the hands because like for whatever, Zoom decided to freeze the bottom panel. So
no problem. So on the committee side, you have Beverly, and on the attendee side, you have Jessica Morris.
All right, let's give Beverly the floor and then Ms. Morris, please.
Thank you again, Chair. And yes, Angel, thank you for that that speech. It was very good, and you hit a lot of great points. I'm glad that you did mention that we had this meeting with those experts in the housing committee. So I was just wondering, because these two committees like overlap in regards to the 421A, that we have some joint discussions in order to deal with it on a broader area, because it affects both sides. Like you said, we have the home ownership and we have the preservations and we have the rentals. And I think it would be beneficial to the community if we had a discussions together to come up with any type of resolutions or ideas to address these issues. And I am concerned now because we have a time constriction, because it's going to be done by it's sunsetting, as you said, in June. And it's nothing, there's a lot of ideas that's going around with the government and everything. But for this community, I think it would be very beneficial if we have joint meetings between the housing committee and the land use to discuss the issues and maybe some solutions for the 421 and how it affects the community.
Thank you, Beverly. We'll definitely take that recommendation under advisement. Luckily for us, we actually have the chair of housing on the call. So you heard the request, John. We will be in conversation. And, again, it's always about being practical and applicable. Yeah, the sun is setting, but that doesn't mean the world stops, right? So we can always continue to advocate and advise our local politicians on what we would like to see with regards to timeline. And that's my 2 cents, but I know Angel's been digging in this for a long time. So Angel, if you have anything to share as well, maybe with that, or if you're okay with what I said.
Yeah, sure. There's a lot of advocacy and movement and discussion on this program currently. On the city level, like the chair of the Housing and Buildings Committee, Pirina Sanchez, has been doing a lot of work on 421A. You can follow her work on it, and also Comptroller Brad Lander has been advocating a lot on 421A, looking to scrap it and replace it with something else. He's also proposing that it be done as part of a reconfiguration of the way that property is assessed and the tax structure in the city. So there's a lot of good information to be sought out in both those and other sources too. ANHD's done a bunch of work on housing and on the 421 program, as well as the Furman Center. So there's lots of good information out there. A very simple Google search, just put in 421A and the first 5 entries are excellent. But in terms of the housing committee, I'm never going to argue for committees to not meet together. But again, just to be clear, like the housing committee doesn't do development policy, does preservation policy, and 421A is on a preservation program. However, there's a preservation question for those properties that are coming out of the program, that I think that needs to be followed up by the housing committee. I just wanted to clarify my earlier comment.
Thank you, Angel. I think that really provides the clarity necessary. So
Yeah,
you
'cause
heard it,
like
Beverly, housing
like,
gotta lead the charge on the
yeah, like
preservation.
these scenarios are, let's be honest, they're scary, right? Like you
Yeah.
find yourself in one position and then the next month, all of a sudden you have to start finding extra dollars. But without all the information, well, it's a scarier predicament without all the information, right? And our obligation is to, find as much useful information as we can to aid our constituents, whoever they are, right? Like, because there are tools, like there may already be tools out there that may be helpful. So that's one thing, but then there may be even more that needs to be done. And through our investigation, we could determine, okay, a little bit more has to be done. So then we got to go knock on some other doors. So in the meanwhile, hold on to this thing that we already have while we knock on doors to get you more. Like that's our remit, right? To do that.
Thank you, Angel.
Yeah.
Beverly, do you have another follow-up? I'm sorry.
Yes, I do have a follow-up. Thank you, Angel, for that, because you're absolutely right. That is a preservation, and the housing committee has to work on the ones that's coming out of the 421A. So we have to find a solution for that. In regards to the land use, there are still developments that's coming up in this community that will benefit from the 421A. So do we make requests or for it has more affordability, because as it was stated, most of these things have been benefited AMIs of 130% of the AMI. So how do we push that it puts in more affordability to people at 30 to 60 and 60 to 80% or even 90% of the AMI with each new development that comes in this community? Because of what I understand during the meeting from the April 4th in the housing, all new developments as of right gets to 421A, but it's the developers who I guess don't put enough of the housing unit size for like bigger families or the affordable to the AMIs that this community has that needs housing for. So how do we push that part of the agenda and the land use for any new development who gets this as of right when they come in to do a new housing, a new construction for this community?
Right. So the thing to keep in mind is not how do we say, is what do we want to say, right? So if our point is that these tools that are being made available to developers, right, as of right, you're doing it here, you have a right to this program, right? You're eligible for it, right? That those tools have requirements in them that are more reflective of the needs of our community, right? So if you're going to have something that they can take off a shelf and apply to their project, that is, for example, subsidizing units at 130% of AMI on the top end, and on the bottom end at 90% of AMI, I'm just making up numbers, that's not addressing the needs in our community. So that band needs to come down. And the question is, how far down does it come? Right? And do we prioritize, do we suggest that such subsidies prioritize the highest needs versus the other needs, right? So if you only have $100, are you going to give 80 of those dollars to someone making $200,000, right? No. Well, $130,000. You're going to want to prioritize to the person making $30,000 because they need it more, right? So that, I think that's the spirit of the suggestions that we should be making policy-wise, right? Because like these tools are finite, right? There's but so much of it, right? And we know it's but so much because each time we ask for something, they say we don't have enough, right? So then that tells us that there's but so much. So then if you only have but so much, then our argument needs to be that you have to prioritize the highest needs. And the highest
Right.
needs in a district like ours are in the vicinity of 30% of AMI, not exclusively, but
Right.
you have to include that too. It can't be left out, right? Because those folks are, left on the market, they don't stand a chance.
Right. I know, and the city council district that we're in, with Ms. Jordan being a council person, the project at 145 and in Harlem has been getting a lot of pushback because of the same situation. They wanted also to change their the use of the property, so the land use of the zoning. They want to change the zoning so they can get 2 towers there for 900 apartments,
Yeah.
but they was only doing, a very small amount of apartments that's affordable to the people in that area or in the city for the AMI that's lower. So they've been getting a lot of pushback, and I think that we can, take that into consideration to give that pushback to any new developments that's coming here, that they do give us more affordability to the AMIs within our community, and see what, like you said, reach out to everybody, the city council, to fight with us to do that with any program that comes here, to give a pushback for that. And I think that would be very beneficial to us.
Yeah.
We're in full agreement, Beverly. Thank you. I definitely also recommend to all the committee members to look at land uses affordability guidelines that we set forth to all of the developers when bringing or presenting to our projects, as well as our employment guidelines relevant to our district. On top of, as always, I'll emphasize the statement of district needs. Jessica, and then John.
Thanks, Jason. Thank you, Angel. Thank you, Beverly. So I have a couple of observations, some suggestions, and some insights. I think it's important to be really wary of the potential amount of development that, and I'm saying something that's well understood by a lot of us, but just to acknowledge it, the amount of development that could happen here in the near future that would be affected by the expiration of this subsidy program, and preservation and the outcomes of that is absolutely, a part of it. On the flip side, I think it's one of the challenges, and Angel, it's a complex set of issues. My understanding is that every time this comes up, it opens up a question, and I think you pointed to the comptroller as bringing up the issue of city property tax reform. It's not unique to East Harlem, but in a similar island community where I spent some time and got to know, not as much intense need per se, but a similar type of vulnerability that you maybe wouldn't expect. There has been a movement and galvanizing around state level legislation for something called a housing bank, where 2% of all real estate transactions over, in that case, it's $1 million, go into a kitty that supports affordable housing development. Currently this 421A tax break, yes, more than 60% of units created 2017 through 2020 were for 130% AMI or over. So I think, is it a good program? Maybe not the best. Angel, your point to us potentially taking a position, I think it's really important to drive home where this gets taken up at the state level as an appropriate place to legislate is really important. So that's something that I agree with and think is important to push for that. And then, I'll just say, as far as AMI and that classification of how it actually works to get people housed securely without vulnerabilities, recently had a kind of a lottery-based process where it gets to the point of determining eligibility when you are at a lower level set of bands. The amount of documentation and the level of stability that you have to prove when, often with a lower AMI, with a lower income, you have more volatility in your life. So those consistent documentation that will essentially get you housed and keep you housed is infinitely more difficult to come by versus stability at 50-80% AMI and above. If you're in that 30% band, the chances that you are making exactly what you need to make at exactly the point in time when your lottery number comes up are so small. And the legalities to disqualification for eligibility, the easiest way they can say no is that's what's looked for, not how can we get people housed when they fall into the classification of what may be a good tenant in the right position. So I think the larger issues of eligibility process, AMI, that do deeply impact this community, they're not solved at the city level, they're not solved at the state level, but I think any opportunity such as this one to forefront those issues as being impactful always in the affordable housing process with the amount of development that will happen here is, that's not an opportunity we should pass up. So to find what it is we need to say as a position and take it in a timely way, how that work happens between now and June. And then, these alternative models, whether it's city property tax reform, housing bank type of transactional, percentage of real estate transactions in the real estate capital of the world relative to our housing crisis and our housing crisis right here with incredibly high need. There's got to be a better solution than these types of giveaways again and again and again. So contribution to discussion, not a bunch of answers.
No,
I'm sorry.
actually, it's a little bit of both. It gives enough that there's questions that are ringing in my head, right? And I can't speak for other people, but sometimes just having open-ended conversation without an expectation of resolution is just as dire, right? I don't know how fun some of you feel, but I'll openly say I have no idea what 421A is or does or will do or can do for our district. But I have faith and belief in the people that have been doing the work, that are in our district, that continue to do the work. And as I constantly will keep expressing, we need to do our homework, right? We need to do our follow through. And if we're going to take a position, we need to, again, unbiasedly be absolute in understanding the position that we're taking and the charge and the mandate that we're asking of our elected officials, right? So I'm saying that because the reality is sometimes doing nothing is just as helpful as doing something, right? To do something erratic and take, I want a letter of support for 421A and you didn't read page 56 of 421A, and you shut out all the homeless people in our community. And again, I'm just reaching with an analogy, then that's a conversation that some of you are gonna have to have later on in housing and account for that. So it is healthy to have these types of open-ended conversations. And if such wasn't the case in previous chairships, I implore you, let's have those conversations. These are delicate and difficult topics. They're compounded. Because when I hear 421A, the simple analysis from a builder's perspective, again, developer gets a tax credit, right, which is a tax break, doesn't have to pay tax because they are part of this program. And again, from what I'm hearing from housing and other people, this is my interpretation. I do implore you, like Angel said, I'm going to watch that housing committee meeting in April. I advise you to check full board. For those of you who missed full board, right? Check the full board meeting. Here our elected official who spoke on 421A, right? Who's also going to present next month, right? This is somebody who's in elected office, who you or whatever our constituents put in office that's doing the work. So let's wrap ourselves around it, right? I hope some of my energy is motivating because I know I'm motivated. Come next month, I'll be an expert on 421A. What's up, Mr. Green? Educate me.
No, I can't educate you that much, kid. But I want to say thank you to you and Angel because of what you said. The thing is that we have been mulling over 421A for a couple of months now, and like some folks came in and said they wanted a resolution immediately before. Some committee members were comfortable in voting for a resolution, and so we've tabled this a couple of times, because we wanted to make sure that it was right and that it helped more than it hurt. So I have a lot of reading and a lot of looking at video over the next 3.5 weeks, because I'm going to try to be ready to discuss it, and if a resolution is possible, we will produce one at the next housing meeting. And but I just wanted to thank you, just saying what you said a couple of minutes ago, that it says voting on something and not fully being aware of it all. That's something that we avoided, and I'm glad that we did, because we heard Sam Stein and Hallie Chu, and it was very informative. And also what Angel said at the beginning of this discussion was spot on, and I thank him for that.
Much appreciated, John. Right? There's no I in team. That said, Chair O'Rourke, Nilsa, sorry, Habit.
Hi. I'm trying to refresh my memory. I'm going to look back at the video that Angel suggested to look at. So I unfortunately missed that meeting. So I'm going to look for the housing minutes. And I think that it's important during full board. I know that sometimes we say for informational purposes only, but the fact of the matter is that not many people go back to revisit the minutes. So when there's discussions as important as this, it's important that we bring it to the attention of all who are actually viewing the meeting. But Angel, I had a quick question in 421A. I haven't read it lately, but it's my understanding that when the developer gets these tax credits, they get these tax credits for a certain amount of years. Whatever development they're building they're still in the program, whether the program 421A ends or not. So just correct me if I'm wrong. So if
No, you're not wrong. I spoke to that earlier. So it's not tax
Okay.
credits. It's a tax exemption, property tax
Right.
exemption. So that
So
for that period of time, you do not pay tax. So property
Right.
tax, if it's 25 years, for 25 years, you're not paying.
Right. So I'm sorry, I had to step away to a Zoom meeting in one ear.
How
So
dare you?
I'm so sorry,
You
but
can't
I'm
be asking
honest.
questions that will answer it. No, I'm joking. Go
No,
ahead,
but a
Nilsa.
quick question. So my question is, was it made clear that those who are currently in this program, even if there is an extension of 421A, that will not affect their agreements?
That was clarified during the housing committee presentations. Yes.
Okay.
So it's you have a contract for a certain amount of time. It's in effect for that duration of that time and not anything further.
Thank you. This old lady thanks you for clarifying it again.
There's no old ladies on this call.
No, and it's an important action and request that we need to drill, right? And we need to drill from to me, even to the agency that provides that. And I'm thinking out loud because, like I said, if this is a nonprofit that presented to housing, I don't know, just shooting from the hip. I want to drill who actually approves the credit and make sure that those that are already contracted, and that's just coordination for preservation, right? At the end of the day, that's on housing will make sure it happens. I want to drive the interest of land use and make sure that land use looks at it from a development standpoint and how can it benefit our constituents, the developers. You'll hear an example given, it was said in this meeting to you all that MTA is doing you favor by, and that's how I took it, is doing us a favor by putting a multi-billion-dollar transportation hub in our district, right? And some of us had an opposing thought process on that mindset, not taking away from it, but as much as there's given, there's taken. So we need to make sure that whatever's happening, one doesn't take, which is some of the concerns that some of us are bringing up here loosely. Let's just do that homework and check the 421A and make sure going out doesn't necessarily affect our constituents and future development, as the concern was raised by Jessica, as well as B, ensure that if this does be removed, whatever is going to come down the pipeline for development and is to some degree going to try to mirror this consistent program. We've learned from this program. Some of you have been around from this program. I like to use this before I was born. So that helps me to go back and say, this is why it didn't work here, that type of example. The way it was told to me is, the city loses billions of dollars in tax revenue from providing this type of exemption. And unfortunately, the city then doesn't have billions of dollars when we make requests for our district in ensuring that our properties are preserved or the apartments are rent stabilized, right? I remember
That's so true.
my apartment in the Bronx was $600 10 years ago. That same apartment is now $1,800. I can't tell you what changed the rule of the law, and I'm all up in real estate and construction, right? But there's a lot of turning wheels. So that's why, again, I applaud John for being present at the meeting and going forward and coordinating and ensuring that, one, let's be real, we don't overstep, because some of us are going to have our personal interests and concerns with preservation. So you got that energy, great. Go to the housing committee next month, right? But for those of us that have the interest in and the concern as it relates to development, I definitely ask that you, one, check the April housing video. Two, you check the full board April. Did we have was it a full board in April or in May? I'm sorry, Angel. I know I'm pulling from it. We haven't had full board yet in May.
Oh, no, yeah, April full board.
So yeah. April full board, housing full board. You'll get a lot of data there on some of the conversation, right? Because some of us, if you're like me, it's easier to pick it up from people than it is sometimes to read all the legal mumbo jumbo. And then my final piece, which Jason's gonna do, just like Angel recommend, is actually read the 421A, right? I remember this board previously approving a tax credit that they swore was gonna affect the rich, and it hurt the middle class. I was the only person out of 50 of us that voted against it, right? I don't forget that. That was my interpretation. I challenge us all to contend that for the future. So let's try to have that discussion by that next month so we can take a position of whether or not we're going to be neutral and move forward. So we're going to table it. We're not going to do anything today because what are you going to write a letter of support of? What are you going to write a resolution for if you don't have the information or the history? And then those are all my notes. You got anything, Angel? Any more homework for us? There's a lot of homework for the month.
That's good. I'm smelling grilled chicken, and then I'm getting ready to.
Yeah, we're going full board time at this point, 2.5 hours.
Never like my wife's literally grilling right outside my window right now.
I don't blame her.
She's
my
killing
wife
me.
already went to sleep. All right. That being said,
Quick
Love you
question.
all. Have a great day.
Can
Beverly, you could call me.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No,
If it's
what it is,
because we've been here 2.5 hours.
yeah, I know what it is that I also think that we should also think about, I know at one of the meetings regarding the 421A, that it was spoke about how sometimes these developers don't do what the guidelines said. So let's think about looking into how can we get a program to lose their 421A? Because I know they say it might be very rare, but if that's an opportunity to get people, just to know that,
Well,
what happens when they don't.
technically now they're all gonna lose it next month.
But no, not the ones that's already in there, because each year they change. If you started in 2020, you got 35 years, regardless of that, because it is based on when you started the program, but if in that program the developer does not adhere to the guidelines, what steps can be taken to take his 421A benefits from them? And I think we should at least know that too. What's the consequences if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing regarding this program? I think we should at least have that in our heads just in case.
I think that's a good point. I like that. That being said, there's no more conversation or questions on that topic. We will move on in the agenda, which pretty much brings us to new business, which there is none except that you have a new chair. And I can commit to doing this as long as I'm breathing, right? So I'll be doing this at least until my term's up. Unless you guys boot me off, you know how that works. So that being said, I don't have any other announcements except those of you, like I said earlier, most of you already know me. My number is 646-342-5026. Call me. Don't be a stalker. I'll block you. That's why I love modern day tech. I don't mind giving my number out because you call me and erratic, we're volunteers. That's all I got to remind most of us. I'm a volunteer as well. So I do this because of the interest and concern of ensuring our community is vibrant and is on point. And I think that we could take that same interest, that same passion we see in our Parks Committee, our Housing Committee, our Human Resource Services Committee, even some of the passion you've seen in SDN. And we could really drive some of that in land use. Because it does get mundane with the technicality and the EULA, make a decision, letter of support, great, we do that, and then we forget about following through on some of this stuff. So I appreciate Angel as well, bringing me up to speed, and more importantly, getting some of these projects that have been dormant for the last few years back in front of us. So kudos to that. Thank you for a perfectly well first meeting, and if there's no objections, I will adjourn. 8:59. I beat 9 o'clock, so it's not.
We have to do roll call.